All right, let's go ahead and get this going. We're going to start with introductions. My name is Tim Jacobs. I'm with the Community Emergency Response Team.
And I'm Nick Holloway, Missoula County Office of Emergency Management, Deputy DES Coordinator, filling in for Adrienne for now. She might be by in a little bit.
Matthew Mill, I'm the terminal manager for the CHS pipeline terminal.
TJ Hagemo, Yellowstone Pipeline, Phillips 66 Operations Supervisor.
Susan Warritz from the Western Montana Chaplain Alliance.
Mitch Warritz from the Western Montana Chaplains Alliance.
Tim DeFore is the county citizen representative.
Ken Morris, Missoula Rural Fire.
Ben Crocker, also Missoula Rural Fire.
Marty Whitmore with the Weather Service. Shane Coleman, Northwestern Energy.
And I'm Charles Tuss with Northwestern Energy as well.
Kelsey Alling, Missoula Public Health.
Travis Ross, Missoula Public Health.
Pam Whitney, Missoula Public Health Infectious Diseases.
Dave Howe, Missoula County Search and Rescue.
Forrest Nelson, American Red Cross.
Chris Clark, Community Medical Center.
Dave Strohmeyer, Missoula County Commissioner.
Corey Hafner, Thatcher Company of Montana.
Gary Zimmerman, Montana Hospital Association.
Brian Hensel, Deputy Public Works Director, City Streets.
Ben Slater, Missoula Police Department.
Ken Parks, Missoula County OEM.
Gordy Hughes, Missoula Fire Department.
Trent Drinkwalter, University of Montana Environmental Health and Safety.
Philip Keating, Missoula Fire Department.
And Randy Ocon, Missoula Emergency Management.
Julia Gore, Missoula Public Health. Stephanie Novak, Community Emergency Response Team.
All right, thank you, everybody, and welcome. The next thing on our agenda would be election of officers. Nick, I'll let you pick that up.
Okay, so every January, we elect new officers, a chair and a vice chair for the LEPC. And we want to thank Tim Jacobs for sitting in as the chair for the last year. Did an outstanding job. Thanks, Tim. TJ Hagemo is our vice chair, and traditionally the vice chair steps into the chair role, and we elect a new vice chair. So do we have a motion? Let's get a motion to have TJ step into the chair role. So moved. A second. Thanks. We can switch now.
Take my toys and leave.
Thanks, TJ.
Good luck.
Yeah, I will. And so now we elect a vice chair. Do we have any nominations for a vice chair? I have a nomination. Ben Slater for vice chair. Second. Second that. Do we have any other nominations for vice chair before we place Ben as vice chair? No, sounds good. So Ben will fill in as our vice chair, and he'll fill in for TJ when he can't be here. Thanks, Ben. Yep. Green is on.
So the next thing on the agenda is public comment. No public comment. The next thing, approved minutes from the last meeting.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
approved. The next thing is community preparedness presentation, floodplain mapping and administration updates. Cassie, the City of Missoula Floodplain Administrator.
Okay, we have Cassie online. Cassie, can you give us a quick mic check?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We got you. Thanks.
Awesome. Let me
So,
just get my,
okay, Cassie will give us a presentation on floodplain mapping and the update on the new floodplain mapping coming our way. And afterwards, we'll have a little time for a question and answer session. Go ahead, Cassie.
yeah, I'm Cassie Trepard. I'm the city's floodplain administrator and a planning supervisor. Sorry I couldn't be there in person today. I was feeling a little under the weather. So since about 2019, the city and county have been working with the Montana Department of Natural Resources and Conservation and FEMA to update the floodplain maps for the Clark Fork and Bitterroot rivers. The county also recently updated the maps for Rock Creek as part of this project. Those maps have been adopted, whereas the maps for the river have not yet been adopted. I'll cover why we're updating the maps, where we're at in the process, and then we can spend a little bit of time looking at the new maps. So our current adopted maps that we use and regulate to are based on data from the 1970s. If you go online, the maps are dated 2015, but that's just the year that FEMA digitized our maps, so they are still using that very old data. Topography changes over time, rivers move slightly, floodplains evolve, and today we also have better surveying technology like LiDAR and floodplain modeling technology, and all of that allows for better accuracy when mapping the floodplains as compared to when we mapped them in the 1970s. We regulate to the 100-year floodplain, which is the 1% annual chance floodplain. That means there's a 1% chance we could see a flood of that size in any given year. The floodwater elevation during the 100-year event is called base flood elevation. We also map the 500-year floodplain, which is the 0.2% annual chance floodplain. These maps are necessary to protect people and property. That is the primary goal of finding out where these flood risks exist. For those who work in emergency management, you need to be able to accurately predict which areas will flood to evacuate people and to plan emergency routes. I'll show the new draft maps in a bit, but there is a tab that shows depth of flooding, which I think could be a really useful tool to those in emergency management during a large flood event. My office and the county planning office use the maps and flood insurance studies to implement floodplain regulations. When someone builds a new structure or substantially improves a structure, we have regulations in place to make sure the first floor is elevated above flood levels. By elevating structures and implementing the floodplain development regulations, structures are less likely to be damaged in a flood. Through our permitting process, we also make sure that people don't do something on their property that would negatively impact their neighbors in a flood. All of this together makes our community more economically resilient after a flood event. The city and county also use these maps to make land use and zoning decisions. And the federal government uses the maps to identify where flood insurance is required for federally backed mortgages. Insurance is really one of the only tools there is to rebuild after a flood, so their component is also very important. And so without updated, new, accurate maps, we really can't do any of this effectively. So these maps are very carefully produced and reviewed by multiple teams of government and private engineers. And so this process takes a long time. Like I said, we started back in 2019. Right now we have draft maps, which are still being reviewed by FEMA. I think these maps have been out for probably a couple years at this point, and the city and county have done some community engagement throughout that time. Of course, there is still misinformation out there, and we have a lot more public engagement to do. FEMA completed their review recently and contacted state DNRC. Their review led to a minor change in the Orchard Homes area. This change impacts a few properties, and I'm happy to walk through it if we have time at the end of the presentation. Overall, though, we are moving forward and are expecting to receive what are called preliminary maps soon. I'm expecting them this month or next month. The preliminary maps aren't different from the draft maps. They're just FEMA-issued maps, which show that they've been reviewed and approved by their office and their engineers. Once we have the preliminary maps, the city and county will send out postcards to property owners that are impacted by this project. And we'll have an open house event with DNRC to answer questions. There will be an appeal period where people can submit better data to request changes to the maps. The appeal period is not about whether someone just likes the new maps or not. Appeals submitted to FEMA do need to provide data showing there is an error in the mapping. After engagement and the appeal period, we can start working towards the adoption process. We don't have an exact date, but I'm estimating we'll be working towards adoption in late 2025 or in 2026. Until then, we are regulating to our current outdated maps. The maps are adopted by updating the floodplain regulations, which reference them. So this means that City Council and the County Commissioners will vote on the adoption of the new maps. So let me just stop sharing and switch gears over to the draft maps. So these maps are online. Anyone can view them. You can find them in the floodplain mapping update tiles on the city's Engage Missoula page and on the county's Missoula Voice webpage. If you just try to kind of scroll into Missoula, it doesn't work very well, so I'd recommend typing an address in or even just the city. And then there are these tabs across the bottom here. So these are the draft maps, the new data. You can compare that to the current effective maps that uses that 1970s data. And then there's a nice, useful floodplain changes tool here. I think what's important to acknowledge here is it shows areas being added to the floodplain and removed and unchanged. Floodplains are a real physical feature, so it's not like the government's just arbitrarily adding something to the floodplain. What this means is that these properties are actually in the floodplain, and our old maps were inaccurate and did not reflect that. Same goes for areas being removed. The old studies and maps thought an area was in a floodplain, showed that, but in reality, the new data shows it's actually not, and so it'll be shown as removed on the new maps. I did mention there is also this flood depth tool, shows you just in the 100-year event how deep the water will be. I think that could be really interesting for looking at roads. For instance, in the 100-year flood, you could see up to, a foot of water on this part of Reserve Street where River Road intersects. That can cause issues for vehicles trying to get through. So going back to the draft maps, just so folks know how to read these when they go to check them out on their own. There are two parts to a floodplain. Those are the flood fringe and the floodway. The flood fringe is in blue and in tan. This is an area where construction is allowed. You can build new structures there, improve structures, add additions, all of that. The blue is the 100-year floodplain. The tan is called Shaded X. That's typically 500-year floodplain, but sometimes it's shallow 100-year. And the 100-year floodplain is when we require permits and floodplain permits and our regulations need to be implemented. The hatched area you see, the red and blue, that is the floodway. This area cannot be built in. New construction's not permitted. It's typically the fastest, deepest part of the floodplain during a flood. However, the floodway is more of a regulatory tool. The floodway is the space the community needs to keep clear in order to discharge floodwaters. And so not being able to build in the floodway, that's a federal regulation, state regulation, and local regulation. But if it weren't, what would happen if you kept building new structures and development in the floodway is you'd start to see the flood level rise, which means the floodplain gets bigger and more properties would be impacted over time. And so that's really the reason you can't build there. Matt Heimels, the county floodplain administrator, he couldn't make it today, so I'm not as familiar with mapping changes outside of city limits. However, within city limits, the biggest change, in my opinion, from the new and old maps is this area west of Russell heading down into Orchard Homes. If you look at the effective maps, you'll see that they're is not floodplain there, and our new data shows that there would be flooding there. What's really happening is water will start to overtop near kind of Russell Street through the gravel pit, come in shallow and flow down back on the wrong side of the Orchard Homes levee. Levees don't do much when water's getting in on the wrong side of it and getting stuck. So that's really the biggest change I'm seeing. I know that's hard news for a lot of folks, but it's better that we know about it than to not know about it. Kind of near the core of the city, there's no real major changes here, some just minor adjustments, but really this area is where we've seen the most change with the update. And just a reminder, I'd recommend folks stay up to date with this on Engage Missoula and Missoula County Voice. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Cassie. Do we have any questions from the audience for Cassie?
All right, the next thing on the agenda is the Butler Creek Fire recap.
Thanks, Cassie.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Randy Ocon with Missoula Office of Emergency Management. I just wanted to take a quick 10 minutes here to review the Butler Creek incident from earlier in July. We had a big wind event 2 days later that overshadowed it and kept us all busy, so we haven't had a chance to do that. So July 22nd, I don't remember, this picture was taken about 3 o'clock in the morning, 2:30 or something. It started. Maybe? Okay, good. Next. So up the Butler Creek drainage, 3 o'clock in the morning, a wind-driven fire out in the grass, light fuels, adjacent to some homes and obviously in the dark. So all things that make us pretty nervous when we're trying to protect public and do effective fire attack. It was in Missoula Rural Fire District's protection, their jurisdiction. So their initial response along with, and I don't quite remember, looking to my friends from the rural, that was automatic aid, mutual aid, pretty quick. Okay, both of those. So the city, Frenchtown, East Missoula and DNRC were kind of on that initial response. So fire started up Butler Creek, pretty close to some homes, initially impacted in that 15 to 20 range that were directly impacted. And then another 30 or so in that drainage, Butler Creek drainage on the other side of the road and up north of that. And then probably 60 in that Inderland, Buffalo Speedway, Tucker Lane area off to the west. So initial evacuations were in that red zone there. The houses right along Butler Creek. That was with the sheriff's office, the incident commander from Missoula Rural. Made those notifications, pushed out through 911 center, pushed out alerts pretty quickly. And then the east side of Butler was added, those homes that were east of the highway or east of Butler Creek and then more to the north. And then initially, you know, the fire, it's hard to tell when it's dark exactly where the fire sits, especially when you're not looking down on it. We were sitting in the bottom of the creek looking up on it. So it definitely was moving off to the west. We had a hard time telling how far it moved. And so we started doing evacuation warnings in the Inderland Buffalo Speedway area to get out ahead of it. About that time, we were able to get a hold of Missoula Fire, and they had resources on scene, Missoula Fire did, but they were able to bring a drone up. As soon as they got on scene, they went up Laval Creek and were able to fly it, and then we could understand exactly where the fire set and that it wasn't going to be making the big push across Laval into there. So that really helped us understand that evacuation area that we needed and our area of operation to scale it back down to what it needed to be. Next. So initially, DNRC, Missoula Rural, added Missoula Fire, Frenchtown, East Missoula, eventually ended up with Greeno Potomac, Arley, Corvallis, Hamilton, Florence, Pinesdale, and Victor Fire. So in that probably 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock hour, somewhere in there, fire was moving really good across the hillside, and through a unified command decided to get more resources there. So it was really awesome to see 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, that many resources coming in to help. A lot, the Forest Service just, some of the fire managers showed up to the ICP, which was useful. Understand what they could offer to the fire, even though it wasn't in their protection and really threatening. But everybody just showed up and it was ready to do what needed to be done to give a hand there. So lots of resources. The mutual aid system worked really well, especially when you start going out of the county. It can get a little bit less defined, but it worked well and they showed up organized and ready to work. So just a couple high points that I wanted to mention. That multi-agency response with no boundaries, without that conflict was so super smooth that morning and throughout kind of the sun came up and through the remainder of that morning as the incident organization got set up. Everything went super smooth because everybody in there. Already mentioned the UAS. I think it's a key tool, especially in these fast-growing wildfire events when we're looking at evacuation, really understanding where the fire sits and what's out in front of it. DNRC had a task force that they had put in place because of fire potential, and we were able to employ them at probably 4 o'clock that morning. Some of their engines showed up. A dozer showed up that was on their task force, and that turned out to be a key piece of equipment. Normally, through an order system, if we ordered a dozer, it would be a shift later, potentially. That's what I would hope for. Having that dozer show up right away, we're able to put some line against the houses and conduct a burn operation, which sealed off all those homes, protected them. Without having the dozer there, it wouldn't have been near as comforting trying to secure that line against the homes, I'll tell you. So the task force, DNRC stepping up, spending the money to have those resources on hand really paid off in this instance. The kind of a complex firing operation in the middle of the night, a little bit of uncertainty where things are, how things were going. Had some key people within Missoula Rural Fire's organization that were on scene that had really good experience with burning. We had the piece of equipment we needed. We had the right people. And so we're able to complete that burn operation, seal off those homes, get those secured, and then the suppression that was going on. Another thing is, I'll just mention the rural, Taylor Blakely, what's his rank? What's his rank? Taylor? Lieutenant Taylor Blakely has been leading the S215, which is the Wildland Urban Interface course through the Southwest Fire Training Zone. So he's been key of that, and their classroom portion of their urban interface has been in Butler Creek. And so Missoula Rural letting Taylor do that and his engagement, all those local resources going up there and doing the home assessment in that area. When this fire occurred, most people knew those homes pretty intimately. Taylor was up there, knew that drainage pretty intimately. So just a shout out to the rural for investing in Taylor and those trainings that have occurred. It really helped us. The evacuations with the Sheriff's Department, we only had the Miller Peak fire going on at the time, and that was kind of in a steady state, I'll say. So the Sheriff's Department had capacity to help us on that. The leadership, So pretty quickly, unified command with the DNRC and Missoula Rural was formed. And then incident management team ad hoc type 3 was about 8 o'clock that morning, took over through the DNRC, and everybody joining in, the rural, there's the city, everybody kind of contributed some players to make that type 3 organization, including our friends at the Forest Service. So, and the best thing is the wind started to die down right about sunrise. That changed the, I was having initial talks with the DNRC and they were looking at a type 2 or a complex team, or a type 3 team of ordering a team in. And because of the capabilities of people that were there and the resources and the wind dying, we kept it local a couple days, turned it back to the local unit and took it off the books. Yeah, so some other key players. Messi was there to help out initially, provide that support. Obviously, the Sheriff's Department doing evacuations. Northwest and Missoula Electric were both up there, and I'm going to get this wrong. Is Bonneville separate? There was some big power. There was a lot of people coming through, all super helpful on, these are our power lines, here's where we start and stop, this is what we can control, turning things off and on, worked really well. And then friends with Burlington Northern Santa Fe showed up. There was some potential threat, if that fire kept growing, to threaten the lines, their rail lines. And so they engaged with us pretty quick and had conversations about their fire train and different capacities that they could bring to help. So pretty down and dirty, but a really good moment for me in Missoula County and our operations, our fire departments and other agencies working together. It was a great stop. Things happened really timely, and pretty proud of everybody that was out there. Questions, comments? Do you have anything to add, Mr. Crocker?
I don't think so. So one of the things following this incident that we realized the key importance of was having folks in those specialized, getting folks out for those specialized skills like firing bosses, dozer boss, having folks that are participating in incident management teams and stepping up to take some of those task force leader positions. This is not our bread and butter. It's not what we do every day. But when it happens, it's really important that we have our folks, in those key positions so that we can do some of that important things like back burning and utilizing a dozer, things like that. So that's one thing we've focused on a little bit with our training, is trying to get, our guys to start those task books and stuff, even though they might not use it for a couple of years. Having them in, when we need them is obviously pays big benefit.
All right, thanks, Ben. Anything else? Questions? Comments from anybody else that was out there? All right, thanks, Nick.
All right, thank you for the update on that. Next on the agenda is the National Weather Service update.
All right, let's get you to where you need to be here, Marty.
Okay. Thanks, Nick.
All right, I thought I'd just start looking at the satellite a little bit. This is kind of one of my favorite loops. It's a water vapor imagery. You can look at it in kind of the lower levels, mid levels, upper levels of the atmosphere. I thought it'd be interesting to look at the low levels of the atmosphere right now because of really kind of what's going on in California. When they have Santa Ana's, it's a major fire concern because of the direction the wind's coming from and the speed of the winds, of course. But it's coming from onshore. So it's a continental air mass that hits that area. And everything in here that's kind of red, yellowish, orangish, that's a dry, really dry air mass. Anything that's blue and green, the stuff that's coming in up over us is moisture. So they've had this system off the coast, a little low pressure system, sort of pulling that flow off the continent, so that's why it's so dry when they get Santa Anas. And then it's also being compressed by its sinking in the atmosphere, and that's a warming impact. So really problematic for fire. Interesting enough, on Santa Anas, often as the fires get near the coast, during the day, they can get a reverse wind profile and get a sea breeze, and they get back up into the marine influence. So sometimes parts of the fire will actually quiet down during the day when, up here, we're always thinking that's our peak burning, and they're worse at night. Inland, though, it's a 24-hour situation, and it can last for days because it's a pretty, under a ridge, it's a pretty stagnant situation. Speaking of the ridge, that's what's kind of dominating the weather over a lot of the West Coast, and that's this big feature that's, over in this area. Where the axis of that ridge is plays a huge role in our weather. So right now, we're starting to get some moisture move over the ridge. It's really not doing much, kind of mid-level clouds. What we're watching for is that ridge retrograding back to the west toward the end of the week and putting us in some sort of northerly flow. And that's going to open the door for Arctic air coming in here. And it's kind of interesting. It's really this feature, this circulation clear out here over the Aleutians that's going to ride up and over the ridge and kind of force the main ridge back to the west. It's not clear exactly how brutal this Arctic's going to be because some of the models keep us in a northwest flow. So we would have kind of a weak seepage of cold air across the divide. Some put us in a northerly flow that make it more prominent. Some actually put us in a northeasterly flow, which would really slam cold air in over us. So you worry about the upper level flow direction-wise, and then you worry about how deep the cold air is. If it's not deep enough, it's just not making it over the divide, or it can seep through Bad Rock Canyon up in the northwest, through Hellgate, things like that. Or if it's deep enough, and it does look like this one's going to be deep enough, it'll come up over the entire terrain and come into us. So that's what we're kind of looking at is cold temperatures. It does not look like there's a lot of moisture with this. Doesn't take a lot, though, when there's cold air to squeeze it out into snow. But it does not look like a big problematic blizzard sort of scenario. It looks like dangerous cold temperatures are the key. By the way, we're changing this year, the Weather Service. You used to be hearing wind chill advisories and wind chill warnings. We're no longer doing that. We'll talk about wind chills, but we're lumping them into cold advisories and extreme cold warnings. Because once the wind goes away, we can still have very, very cold temperatures, but if there's no wind, it's hard to call it a wind chill warning. So we kind of simplified that. So this will be the first year we're doing that. So if we look at the forecast, on our front page, it's still far enough out that we're not putting out highlights for this yet. We usually keep that in the next 48 hours or so. So some of the messaging is what we call weather stories. And we experiment with a whole type, a lot of different ways of messaging this thing. Yesterday, the people there in the operations, they started talking about what are we confident on and what are we not confident. The thing we were pretty confident on is the onset, the timing of this thing. So the graphic here on the left is sort of new tools that we have in place that you can look at all the models and say what's the earliest onset of timing that the model suite is expecting. So you can see, and they need to update this. This is something you got to update every day. The future's a moving target, right? You got to keep up with it. But we were pretty confident that here in Missoula, we're not going to see much of cold air seepage until later in the day. So that's good. That's, folks can make decisions about kids out there sitting at a school stop or people who walk or bike commute to work may not have to worry about it. Most of the cold air is going to be over the weekend. And the fact that it's a 3-day weekend might even further lessen the impacts for folks who happen to have that off. I think most of the schools. On the right, we're talking about snow, but again, there's not a lot of snow expected, so we're not really focusing too much on that. Stay tuned. And then we put out another weather story just to maybe start talking about the uncertainty and the ranges of that. And this is something you got to update every day, and I'll talk a little bit more about it. We use an interesting tool called the National Blend of Models. It's really a processor that takes all our models, and in the short term, that's well over 100 members, 100 different models that we're looking at, and we do a statistical analysis on those. And this is a box and whisper plot of the temperature ranges from that model suite. And so the min temperatures in blue, max temperatures each day, I guess I can go a little bit low and you can see the days, are in red. And then you can mouse over, and the actual shading colors are the 25th to the 75th percentile of those temperature ranges, and then the whiskers are the 90th and 10th, and you can go out to the 1st and the 99th. And extreme situation like this, you might have to do that because there are times when the what happens in real life even goes beyond what the models. So anyway, we're looking at warming temperatures right on through Thursday. And sometimes the models don't handle warming for us in the valleys because they don't see the cold pools as well. So that's the experience. But I think there'll be a little wind on Thursday, probably mix those up. So I wouldn't be surprised to get into the 40s on Thursday. And then we get that cold air start to impact us Friday. I don't think it'll be problematic for us until maybe Saturday morning. You'll start to see it. So some of the temperature ranges, and you see like a situation like this on Sunday morning, there's not a lot of certainty because I talked about different scenarios which would give us stronger cold temperatures or stronger cold surge. So the forecast, it will go out there around single digits, 2 degrees, but the actual range is much broader than that. And the box and whiskers, I can even change that to, let's look at both that and let's look at the full range of the model solution. So you see there, the models think it could be anywhere from 16 above to 21 below. And, you'd never want to tell the public that, right? But it's actually useful information to see how much uncertainty there is. And so if below zero is a big deal for any decision you need to make, you better be prepared for that, even though that may not be the forecast that goes out there. In fact, we might not even be talking about 0 degrees at all in the forecast. Some of the messaging we will talk about low probabilities of that. And anywhere, we don't show this to the public all that often, but this is what we're looking at. And anytime we have a wide spread like that, we'll try to talk about maybe lower confidence in this particular solution. And then it's interesting, once we start warming up of that, even though we're more days out, the confidence in the solution is better because the ranges are a little bit lower. There's a little bit different ranges of uncertainty. So that's kind of what we deal with when we're trying to message to the public, and we'll maybe use those weather stories at times to maybe educate, because we're going to be doing that more and more, talking about the probabilities of hitting certain thresholds. If we go a little bit farther in the forecast, beyond that, this initial surge of cold temperature, and we look at the 6 to 10 day forecast, it's still going for, colder than normal, but the real confident colder than normal is back east. They're going to be in that northerly plunge for a while. And under that ridge, we'd expect it to be pretty dry. So it's a dry forecast in the 6 to 10 day. 8 to 14, it's still kind of a cool forecast, but not as much confidence. That ridge, boy, you look at Alaska and that warm solution out there tells you the ridge is still pretty prominent, just maybe further retrograded off the west coast. Not much signature for moisture, but we can go to Climate Prediction Center forecast and go out even farther. They've been doing this experimental 3 to 4 week outlooks. It's just taking that bridge between the 8 to 14 day and the monthly forecast. It's interesting. They really see it getting fairly active with moisture. Not saying much for temperature, but they do say a wetter than normal forecast as we get into the first week in February. And then, of course, from the CPC site, we can go out and look at our kind of seasonal or 3-month look at things. La Nina, we're actually in La Nina right now. We've just got there. And it looks like it's going to be very weak and pretty short-lived. So it's a weak La Nina right now. The expectations are we'll be out of it in the March, April, May timeframe. But it looks like, the forecast that I'm seeing still have a kind of a La Nina look to it. Below normal temperatures, this is January, February through March, cooler than normal, wetter than normal. And that goes for nearly the whole northern tier of the U.S. That's typical La Nina stuff. We step out a little bit farther. They continue that cooler than normal. Now, these are only updated once a month, and we're just about a week out from them being updated, so we'll see what they say after that. So still cooler and wetter, and we kind of finish out what we'd expect snow accumulation season, and it's still maybe weaker, cooler than normal, and we're kind of getting away from the wetter than normal, but there's still some hint at it there. So that's kind of our forecast. So thought I'd look at maybe where we're at from a snowpack standpoint. So if we look at our basins, and that's what we kind of go across the basins, and these are based on the SNOTEL sites, which are much more accurate in the mountains. We don't have a lot of snow information in the valleys. You have to manually measure it in the valleys. Up here, we have automatic platforms, though, that look at it and they compare it to normal. The northwest part of the state has been doing better for us for moisture. These snow amounts, and this is actually not depth, this is snow water equivalent, so how much water's in the pack, which is the most important thing to look at for a water supply and of course our flood outlook as we get into that. We're real close to normal. The northwest Montana has gotten above normal. This doesn't capture all the rain that occurred though, and it's been a pretty warm fall and early winter, so a lot of this, so these aren't very impressive, but they've really gotten out of their drought completely up in Lincoln County, Flathead County. We're still in a little bit of drought. The Blackfoot is our basin that continues to be the most problematic of drought. Drought, we probably won't change drought look too long. It's harder to assess drought in the winter because all that water's being stored. You got to see how it comes off, right? So we'll get more active in that in the spring. But as we start thinking about, it's early, we think about flooding on the Clark Fork, but we always know about the Clark Fork. Blackfoot's a major contributor of the Clark Fork. So if this stays drier than normal, and I'm not saying it will, the indication is still we'll have some winter left. We'll see what happens, but that would lower the potential impact of flooding down there. You can also look at individual SNOTEL sites. We'll stay away from that right now. We can look at remotely sensed snowpack, which is kind of cool, has some utility. If we zoom in, and I've got also snow water equivalent. So this is what is being remotely sensed is out there. The one thing I like about this, you can look at the scales on the right, inches of water equivalent, but purple reds are really wet. And this is not a precision tool. This won't tell you how much you have in your backyard. You probably measure different than what has on this, but this is for kind of the big information. So one thing I like about this is you can quickly compare it to last year. So this is, if we just go to 2024 and redraw the map, and then you can kind of toggle back and forth. So here's this year, here's last year. We're doing quite a bit better. Even though we're below normal snowpack, a little bit, just within 10% of normal, we're doing substantially better than we did last year. We've been kind of waiting for a La Nina winter to kick in, but it's certainly doing better than last year's El Nino winter in the mountains. Valleys, though, it was kind of interesting. Whoops. Actually, it showed us having a little bit more in the valleys down here in the valley than we do now. But we do finally have some snow in the valleys. So anyway, we're doing better than we did last year. We're about normal, which would be a nice sweet spot for decent water supply, yet not as big flood potential, but we'll see if we stay there. The forecast is still kind of La Nina-ish with wetter, cooler than normal through February and March. So, and that's all I got.
Thanks, Marty.
Yep.
For that mostly good information. Hopefully it doesn't get to minus 21 anytime soon.
All right, thanks for the weather update. Next on the agenda is the mobile command vehicle update.
So Missoula County acquired a mobile command vehicle through a grant last year, and we've been working on getting it fitted properly. And Randy, can you speak a little to where we're at with the mobile command vehicle? Randy's been leading that project.
Yeah, so the mobile command vehicle is back with us. It spent an extended amount of time getting painted, but we just got it back here in the last month or so, and we're working on outfitting. We're due to have that grant expended 15th of next month, so buying a lot of stuff here quickly. It's out at Missoula Rural Bonners Fire Station 4, yeah? Station 4. Thanks to those guys letting us keep there and do our work on there. And we'll look to probably March, when the weather turns nice, we'll do open house on it. Questions? Nope.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is emergency alerts issued this quarter.
So this is for the last quarter of 2024. We had 14 alerts delivered during that time from October through the end of December for 6 incidents. So most incidents have an alert issued and then a resolution coming afterwards. So we had 2 different incidents for missing persons, a missing 86-year-old male and a missing 72-year-old female with both with memory issues. We had 2 law enforcement incidents where 5 alerts were sent. One was be on the lookout for a male, and that male was eventually located. And the second was a shelter-in-place alert for an incident that occurred near Kemp Street in West Sussex, and a resolution was issued there for people to resume normal activities. And then there were also 2 wildfire alerts, incidents that resulted in 5 alerts. One near Condon and one just south of Sealy Lake.
Okay, thank you. The next on the agenda is the LEPC Standing Committee reports and updates. That IMT Oversight Committee.
No report from the IMT Oversight Committee. They did not meet.
Access and Functional Needs Committee.
So we have Julia Gore from the Health Department, who facilitates that committee. Will report on that.
Thank you. I'm the Public Health Emergency Preparedness Coordinator, and I am housed at the Health Department. So the AFN subcommittee is still going strong. We're going through a little bit of restructure, moving away from project-based and more of a report out and collaborative work. I think that's going to work really well for members' capacity. We're also editing the mission and vision statement to focus on more of a holistic approach with planning, response, and recovery to emergency. Right now, it just talks about planning for emergencies, but we all know there's more to it than that. So that group is going strong. Moving on to HEAT, Health Emergency Advisory Team. We have not met yet. We're meeting really soon, but it is respiratory season and we are looking at some measles, aka whooping cough cases. I don't mean to pick on you, Pam, but do we have any updates with that? So just, yeah, so just a sprinkling of that. Sorry, I meant to say pertussis. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for the updates. Next on the agenda is grants, the Homeland Security Grant.
Good afternoon. I missed introductions. Adrienne Beck with the Office of Emergency Management. Sorry, I was running a little late. So Homeland Security grants, the notice of funding opportunity for those should be coming out sometime this month. The awkwardness is that they require any project coming out of a jurisdiction, so either the city of Missoula or the county of Missoula in our case, to be ranked by the LEPC, and the applications are due before our next meeting, traditionally, unless they change that schedule this year. So historically, what we have done is we've utilized the executive committee of the LEPC and our office, who typically has knowledge of most of the applications coming out from our jurisdictions, to go through and provide that ranking and that support letter that is required as part of the application process. Currently, I know of a couple projects that agencies are looking for here in Missoula County. The sheriff's office is moving to a new location primarily out of the courthouse now. We'll be moving to a new facility across from the detention center. That facility does need a backup generator, and so that may be a project that we look to push forward on behalf of the county. I have not heard any other projects, but if this is your opportunity to kind of go back to your agencies and think about any kind of projects that you would want to pursue with Homeland Security funding. It is 100% funding and that there's no local match. But traditionally, it is a nexus to terrorism is what makes those grants most competitive. Speaking of Homeland Security grants, we have several that are open. So Randy gave you an update on the mobile command vehicle. That was obtained through a Homeland Security grant, continues to be open. We also have a community CPR grant that was funded through Homeland Security, which enables us to teach hands-only CPR courses to the public, free of charge, but it also enabled us to launch Pulse Point, which notifies public responders of CPR needed in public places. The Community Wildfire Defense Grant, I've provided updates on this before, I believe, but the county was awarded about just over $4 million over the next 5 years to do as the name implies, wildfire mitigation within Missoula County. And part of that was to not only increase the pace and scale of the amount of mitigation that we're able to do on private property, but also to build a wildfire program within Missoula County. And so over the last 2 months, we've had a couple positions that we've been recruiting for as part of that grant, 2 wildfire mitigation specialists. Those positions have, we have offers and they've been accepted. They'll be starting in February and March with an emphasis on just being able to have more bodies available to go out and do home assessments, but also to really build a comprehensive education and outreach program in association with that. And then finally, Missoula County was awarded a similar grant through the BLM. It's much smaller, but again, it is designed to, in some focused areas, conduct fuel mitigation on private property.
Okay, thank you. The next on the agenda is upcoming trainings and exercises.
So Missoula County will be looking to put together a work group to put together a multi-year training and exercise program. This will reach out to various agencies and any other interested parties through our LEPC distribution list to see who might be interested in informing what we should be training and what we should be exercising. Traditionally, after exercises, we do an after-action report that includes both our successes and challenges after the exercise. And we try to look to those challenges and train on those challenges and then exercise them in the future. So we'll be diving into that a little bit, and I'll reach out to everyone here through the LACP distribution meeting to see who's interested in being part of that group. For exercises, we did an exercise about a month and a half ago centered around power safety, public safety power shutoffs. That was led by the state of Montana DEQ. We talked about notifications and priority power restorations and what it might look like for the access and functional needs community if power was shut off for an extended portion of time. But really, that one, it was great, and it was good to get everybody in a room. That is really helpful to talk those things out and know who you will be talking with in a real-world incident. So that's the exercise we did recently. Any other exercises to report on, Adrian?
So we've contacted the promoters for the Zootown concert series that's coming in over the 4th of July. And we'll be doing a tabletop exercise with them, inviting all our partners. That'll probably be in that March, April time range, where we'll have all the agencies and partners come. We'll go over specifics of their plan and then tabletop exercise that they're going to develop for us. So I think I have most people's contact, but if you're interested in attending that, make sure you get a hold of me to ensure you make the list.
Thanks, Randy. And that jogged my memory. We also did a measles tabletop exercise led by Missoula Public Health. We had a lot of players in that one, or a few players in that one, including DPHHS, and just talked through what a measles response would look like. Measles is a highly infectious disease, so that's always a concern for public health, and what that would look like, what that response would look like.
Okay, thank you. The next on the agenda is local and statewide hazmat incidents since last meeting.
It's hot off the presses. So we are planning to do an ICS 300, 400 for the last week of March, that March 25th. Still working on some of the details, where it's going to be located, but and class sizes, but I think we've got quite a bit of interest already. So if you're interested in ICS 300 or 400 or participating on incident management team, let me know. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Does anybody else have any exercises or trainings that they would like to talk about? Seeing none.
All right, next on the agenda is local and statewide hazmat incidents since the last meeting.
That was nothing to report for our video coverage later. Thank you.
And the last thing, roundtable or other business.
Okay, we'll pass the mic around. Whoops. We'll pass the mic around, and if anybody has anything to report, now's your chance.
I just wanted to mention to the group that it is open enrollment for the Western Montana All Hazard Incident Management Team. So I'll be sending out the application process to the large organizations that tend to support our team. So look out for that in your inbox.
I guess one thing I forgot to mention too, in the forecasting, one thing we do is look at analogs. We try to look back at historical patterns that match the upcoming pattern expected and then what happened on the ground. And the closest analogs we can find to this upcoming Arctic did allow Sealy Lake to get down to like 34 below. So that's on the very extreme end of what these physical models are putting out for this event. So Potomac, Sealy Lake, that area, and then up through Swan and up through Pole Bridge areas. I wouldn't be shocked if those go to extreme cold warnings, and then the areas around here in Flathead Valley, things like that, maybe cold advisory, stuff like that. So there's some potential from this Arctic for sure. And then it doesn't look very long-lived, but ice formation on the streams will be something that could be an impact. Short-lived, so I wouldn't necessarily expect mainstream issues, but maybe the cricks and whatnot. So anyway.
Well, thanks for that.
Yeah. You want a quick wildland update?
Yeah, we do.
All right. So Missoula Fire Department, Philip Keating, we have sent 3 Type 3 engines down to California, and with some support personnel as well. We've had one down there for roughly 2 months, assisting with some of their staffing issues that they're having in California. And then with the Palisades fire, we sent 2 additional engines as well as Missoula Rural. So I think it was a total of 10 engines out of Montana, and then numerous overhead that I'm aware of. So
utilizing the EMAC process, or was that?
So one was the first 2, the one we've had for 2 months was regular typical dispatch using IROC. The day after Palisades started, we had an additional IROC request and then an EMAC request that followed up with 10 engines and support personnel.
Thanks, Philip. Anybody else who would like to report on at the roundtable?
Peek around the pillar.
All right.
Motion to adjourn?
Thanks, everybody.